All right, now I'm recording. So yeah.
All right, good.
Missed that first part where I said I'm recording and then I wasn't, but then I said I'm recording. So now we're good.
Yeah, and everyone else is caught up. So everyone else knows what's going on.
Yeah, very, very exciting.
Yes.
Very exciting talk about hitting little round red buttons.
Yes. I mentioned right before we started recording, and then before we actually started recording.
Yes.
So I have finally, and I'm so happy about it, but I finally started reading more, which is great.
Good.
And I think I mentioned this last week as well. And it's nice to finally be getting through the massive pile that I keep adding to. But more than that, being able to get the thoughts flowing and learning more information and just being inspired in different ways.
Yeah. Is summer typically like your main reading time, or is it like, I could see that being like, I imagine like wintertime, curled up by the fireplace, if there is a fireplace, reading a book. That's kind of the classic thing. But I could see how like summertime could be a good time for some reading as well. I do enjoy reading in my hammock in the back deck. So
yeah, I don't know what it is exactly. It's just, I was emailing with Garrett Hess, and I mentioned to him that ever since my fiance has been home for the summer because of being a teacher and not having and having the summers off, ever since she got home, it's like I'm not sitting at the desk all the time anymore. Like, it's rare that I'm sitting at the desk unless I'm editing the podcast or editing photos or something. Otherwise, I'm like, I'll be sitting on the couch, or we'll sit outside if it's not too terribly muggy out. Like, today's awful. But and so therefore I'm not just randomly looking at YouTube videos. I'm not just filling my time with stupid little activities, whatever, like looking online. It's whatever. Like, honestly, there's no rhyme or reason.
Scrolling and
exactly
whatever. Yeah.
And so instead, I've been filling my time with reading, and I want to start, of course, as I've spoken ad nauseum about writing as well, which Dodge and Burn has been
an
helping.
ongoing theme. Yeah.
But it still needs to, I need to break out the journal and just start handwriting just the thoughts that I get from these books and that kind of thing, which I think will help to, or I know will help to spark everything else. Like I said, it's just, I don't know exactly what it is about why there's a correlation or a seeming correlation between her being home and me like reading more and being more productive in better ways. But I'm not going to complain about it.
Exactly. And it's also good because, this summer will go by fairly fast, but you'll be able to settle into this new routine of, doing those things that you've been wanting to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully that's just the start of something that'll last for, a good couple months or so.
Yeah. So one of the books that I started reading yesterday, is Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey.
Okay. Yeah. It's an interesting one. How far into are you so far?
So I am, let me see, about 23 pages into it.
Okay. So the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to read this passage from the 17th page where he finds this, he comes outside and he's sitting on his doorstep early one morning, and he notices a rattlesnake that's right in front of him by his bare feet. And the passage starts, there's a revolver inside the trailer, a huge British Webley .45, loaded, but it's out of reach. Even if I had it in my hands, I'd hesitate to blast a fellow creature at such close range, shooting between my own legs at a living target flat on a solid rock 30 inches away. It would be like murder. And where would I set my coffee? I just love that. Like, I really am enjoying his writing style so far. The little bits of humor, the crudeness, the very straightforward style of writing and thinking.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting too, because so I know that this book is essentially what caused Guy Tall to move to Utah. and fall in love with the desert. While he was on, the story goes that while he was on night watch, I think it was night watch for the military service, they had brought in these books, and Desert Solitaire was among them. And as he was in night watch, he was reading this book, and it made him fall in love with the Southwest.
I can totally see that, yeah.
I can absolutely see, too, reading through this, just little bits and pieces that have inspired Guy and his writing. Especially when Guy becomes more, or writes more narratively, rather than being so heady and philosophical, you would see the similarities between it, which I think is just fascinating. But this book, too, has me thinking about Utah more and the desert more and wanting to visit. And so I think my fiance has 2 weeks off for Christmas break, and I think we're going to make a trip.
Interesting. Yeah. That's, there's something very addictive about that area. And when it comes to that book, I love how descriptive he is, which is something that you're definitely picking up on there. And I think for people that have been to that area, like I know that the first chapter, so first several pages, the way that he was describing the land was something that I just immediately, because I know that he mentions reflected light in the Song of a Canyon Wren very early on in that book. And there's just the way that he describes things, the way that you mentioned about how he's just very kind of frank about things, the writing style. The book kind of wanders a little bit later on where it seems like it's something very odd, but you'll know when you get to that part. And there's some other parts as well that definitely feel a bit dated.
Yeah, I know from reading about him that he was not politically correct, like racist and poor modern tendencies. But as I was talking to my fiance about it, I'm like, that's a lot of these guys, like old writings and stuff like that. They're of their time, and you have to take that for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely some stuff where you read it, I'm like, I don't know about that. but he speaks very nicely of the birds and the reflected light. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a connection to the land in those parts that really comes through in the writing. And it would be very interesting if you guys do end up going out there just to see how much, because it's such a dramatically different landscape than what you're accustomed to. Right. But just see how you feel about that. And certainly around Christmas time, it's different because it can be very cold there. It's going to be very wintry. You get the whole experience for certain, but it is a place that changes so much based on the seasons. Summer is not the greatest.
That's why I figured too. I'm like, she has these 2 weeks off. I'm like, and we were debating what to do with them because I don't want to just sit around the house for 2 weeks during that time. Like, I want to actually be doing something. And I said to her this morning, I'm like, why don't we just, because we talked about it before, I'm like, why don't we just go out to Utah and see what happens?
So whenever I read a book like that, I want to, so for those who have not read the book, he talks about his experience as one of the first park rangers at what becomes Arches National Park. And he's headquartered in this little corner of the park, and he talks about the view, everything he sees and everything. And that's all great, and he's great with the descriptions, but I like to see it for myself. So when I was reading about it, then I'd pull up Google Maps, and I'd try to figure out the exact area where there was this trailer that he was living in. And so I tried to figure out where that is, and I found it. And just to then look at the actual pictures of that landscape to see what it was that he was actually looking at. And then also, as a little bit trivia, if any of you like to sleuth around on with the satellite images and stuff, the only remnants of the area where his trailer was is there's actually an old rusty metal pipe there, which is actually the sewer line for the trailer. It's still there. So it is an interesting thing because the way that he writes, it could be, you could go into it assuming that it's fiction. You can go into it assuming it's nonfiction. It could kind of go either way. by and large, the vast majority of it is real, but there's some parts near the end that seem quite fictional. But actually, where he was positioned, that area is there, and you can actually go and stand there if you want to, which is kind of interesting to experience it as he experienced it as an author. And I think it's really fascinating to be able to view those areas. So if you're good on Google Maps, see if you can find that sewer pipe. So, you know.
Yeah, I also it's interesting for me as I continue thinking about my path forward, and especially around my writing and what I want to focus my writings on. And I really appreciate his writing style in the sense that, at least so far, it has been, he's not talking from now looking back. It's all present mind. It's all
yes. I love that.
Yes,
I love that style.
Exactly. It's he's not using much or any past tense. It's all just very present. And
yeah, because as a reader, it puts you right in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which hits on a little bit of, when I was doing the journal entries when I go on my trips and describing things in the present, and then using that as the voiceover, because I love that vehicle, and it's partially inspired based on reading that book. So that's been a bit of an influence for me as well. So how are you planning on using that for that sort of inspiration for your work?
My biggest issue when it comes to my writing, and it's something that I have to grapple with and either accept or change, and I've kind of always wanted to change it, is that I write a lot in past tense.
Yeah.
And I've always, like I just said, I've always really appreciated writing like what Abbey uses. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, is just like you said, how powerful or how much more powerful it can be, especially when writing about nature, especially when writing about such topics as these. It can be much better to write presently and suck the reader into that moment instead of trying to look back on things.
Yeah. And also there's another aspect of it as well, which is when stuff is written in the present tense, somehow it seems to simplify the writing. Maybe it's easier to read that way, but it feels like it breaks down those barriers even more and really lets the person in even more.
Even when I'm writing my journal, so too, the more I think about it, if I'm writing a journal entry, it's all looking back on the day. It's never written as if it's happening play by play. And I don't know why that is. I don't know whether there was something in my schooling that I just gripped onto that for some reason they said to write using one version over the other, or if I just rebelled against what they wanted, or what the case was. Yeah,
and that's also something where, when I was doing the journal entries on the spring trip, rather than just at the end of the day, write an entry about what I did, I wanted to, a couple times throughout the day, just sit down with my, back against a sandstone wall in the shade, pull out the journal and just start writing about what I am doing, what is coming up, talking about what my hope is for what's going to happen and all this. It seems less like when talking to the past tense, it's almost it's like bullet points. It's kind of we did this, blah, blah, blah. And you take it's as though you're just reciting what happened, as opposed to having more of a voice in the work. So that's there. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to that.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how things unfold with my writing after reading this book in particular. I want to finish up this one before I get The Monkey Wrench Gang, which is his other popular book.
I read that one too. It's an interesting one. That one's completely fictional.
Right.
It's interesting. It's kind of a extreme environmental activism / terrorism, but it's interesting. It's engaging, but that it was. He does have some of the same descriptive style in there.
Okay.
About staying in the present. But yeah, I think you'll find that one to be an interesting read. It's a peek into his mind. That's for sure. Yeah.
But other than that, I've been watching The Bear on Hulu. It's a FX original, and we're the third season now. I mentioned it before in an earlier episode, but there's a scene where the main character is just working for hours on trying to figure out the menu for this restaurant, and he is putting together these different plates, and it's just this beautiful compilation of him working on and obsessing over everything, an obsession over the craft. And I think there's definitely dialogue there over what is too far to obsess over the craft. And that kind of goes...
kind of leaning towards perfection as opposed to excellence kind of a thing.
Yeah. So in this season, which light spoilers for those who haven't watched or want to watch, one of the main things that he wants to do is change the menu every day. And that's something that top tier restaurants that have multiple Michelin stars all tend to do. It's not so much that you'll go into their, like at a traditional diner or a restaurant, you'll go in, you're presented a menu, and you have your choice of whatever it is.
Yeah.
At these
moons over my hammy. Yeah.
At these places, it's more, okay, I'm going to spend $175, $300 or whatever for my seat. And over the course of 2 or 3 hours, I am going to be presented a 9-course or 7-course dinner. Yeah. And everything's already picked out for me. Everything is just, it's the experience that you're paying for just as much as the food itself. And you put full trust into the chefs for that experience. Changing that menu up every single day is something that's started in the very first episode and has continued on thus far. We're about 5 or 6 episodes in out of the 10, I think. And it's helping to drive that narrative of obsession over craft and obsession over perfection. And at what point do you pull away from that desire for perfection and realize that this is going to make or break you? And this is going to, this could be your demise.
It's not going to be sustainable.
Exactly.
It's working at too high of a level, and to have to, it's like redlining an engine continuously. Something's going to give.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting to watch, because as I watched that scene in particular, and I think it was the first episode or maybe the second, it just, something in me, like, I don't know how to word this exactly, but I really related to that. Like that desire for perfection and obsession. Like to be able to have something like photography, you can't, it's a little more difficult to get to that level of obsession, especially working with like nature photography, landscape photography, because you don't have control over every single little thing unless you're staging it at home. And then that's something totally different anyway.
Yeah.
And maybe you can a little bit when it comes to editing and that kind of deal, but still there's only so far that you can take it. Whereas with something like creating food dishes or like even writing, I could relate it more to, of obsessing over an essay again and again. And how many drafts are you going to do of this essay before you finally release it, before you finally let it go out into the world? It was just like that clicking moment of sorts.
Yeah. And thinking about that, I was thinking about that in terms of the learning curve of photography, where I feel like in the beginning, when people are getting into photography, you see all this beautiful work out there, you're inspired by it. And then to me, at least somewhat early on, there was this feeling of a need for perfection with the work, technical standpoint and everything else. Maybe as a way of, comparing one work to the other stuff that you see out there and striving for that. But then for me, at least, I let go of that quite a while ago. And it seems like it's more toward the early stages of one's progress of trying to find that perfection. Because at some point you realize that, perfection's not a thing. It's in learning to embrace those imperfections, I think, is where the beauty of the art is. And like, I know that like for me, if I try to do writing, I'm toward those early stages because I'm not a writer. I mean, I know something that's very good when I see it, and I want to strive to produce something that's very good if I'm actually, going to attempt it. And I feel like I get stuck in that wanting it to be perfect trap. But I suspect that if I were to be doing writing more for a living, if I was to do it more often, at some point you let go of that, and then you just let it be what it is. And I don't know if I think it was the foreword or whatever, the preface or whatever it was before Desert Solitaire, but he had a note in there, Edward Abbey had a note in there saying basically that there's going to be a lot of flaws in the stuff, the grammar and that, and basically I don't care. I think it was in Desert Solitaire.
Here we go. So he says, certain faults will be obvious to the general reader, of course, and for these I wish to apologize. I quite agree that much of the book will seem coarse, rude, bad-tempered, violently prejudiced, unconstructive, even frankly antisocial in its point of view. Serious critics, serious librarians, serious associate professors of English will, if they read this work, dislike it intensely. At least I hope so. To others, I can say only that if the book has virtues, they cannot be disentangled from the faults. That there is a way of being wrong which also seems sometimes necessarily right.
I think he put it, there was an intentional typo in there somewhere too, if I remember right, just as a statement. Because I remember reading that, and I think he spelled something wrong. He did something intentionally wrong in there. I can't remember what it was, but I remember that standing out to me. And I feel like that's the attitude that a person has after they've been doing something for a while, where they're just like, it is what it is. I'm going to embrace the imperfections. I'm not trying to please everyone with it.
Yeah.
I'm just going for something that I enjoy. And so I think that's something that comes with time and with experience. Because I can't imagine a person constantly chasing that degree of perfection for everything they do, because that just must take all the fun out of it.
I mean, the problem with that, if you're constantly chasing perfection, is when you first start out, there is a certain bar, a certain level that you want to get to, right? So when you're first starting out with, let's say, photography, you just want to be able to photograph a scene, a beautiful sunset, using all manual control. And that's a bar that you want to get to. That's what you want to achieve. And then as soon as you achieve that, you reach quote unquote perfection with that, while your bar raises. And every single time that you achieve something new, it keeps raising. And so if you're constantly chasing perfection, you're never going to achieve it, because your perceptions on what is perfect, on true perfection, keep being leveled up, keep being raised. So like for me, I'll go through maybe 4 drafts of an essay, and then I have to let it go. Because if I don't, there's no way that I'm going to ever get it out there. There's certain articles that I've written that are 3,000, 4,000 word articles that I love, but they're not going to be published anytime soon because I can't get over that hump, you know? And I think that's something that becomes realized more the more practice you get with it, that bar, that level is always going to be higher than what you will be able to achieve. It's just naturally like that. And so that's why I also think it's important for anyone. I mean, regardless what you're doing, look back at what you had done 5 years ago, or back when you first started, or even a year ago, and compare that to what you're doing now. And you're going to see like, oh yeah, now I get it, kind of deal. Like,
yeah.
So
and also whether it's a person reading something that you've written, or a person looking at a photo you've taken, I think perfection isn't something they even care about.
No.
I think if anything, perfection just means it's sterile, it's cold, it's not human, it's not real, you know. It might give AI vibes if it's if it's too perfect.
Plus,
just like you see a photo where it's like, wow, that looks really perfect. That's not real. It doesn't strike any sense of awe. It just uncanny valley. So perfection should not be the goal. Just excellence, and just having those little flaws in a way that show some degree of
humanity,
that it's real, make that it's genuine.
Yeah. Plus, there's also the thought that perfection is subjective. Like,
yeah, very true.
What's perfect to you is not going to be perfect to me, or not necessarily all the time, at least. Like, when it comes to writing or photography or anything, what you view as being perfect and where you would gladly stop or be extremely happy to have achieved, I may think, no, you keep going. And you could get better than that, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So,
and also, I was thinking about, like, okay, if let's say that there's a photo that you're pretty happy with, you share it, however you're sharing it, and then someone comments, "Oh, that's a perfect photo." How does that make you feel?
I honestly don't know that would change anything. That would just be, again, going back to that subjectivity of it. Like, I would point out all the flaws immediately in my head. I'd be like, you need to lay off the coffee or drink.
Yeah. To me, it feels a little hollow. It feels a little empty, because we all know it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It feels weird to me. So that's kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure what I would prefer a person say, but to say, "Oh, that's perfect," like, no, we all know it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's if that's perfect, then it's all downhill from here. Because I did it. I took the perfect picture of a tree.
Yeah.
Everything else no longer perfect.
So are you saying that I've reached my peak if I get a comment like that?
Yes.
Yes. That's what you're telling me.
Yep. It's going to be a rough road, just downhill from here.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. But that's, there's a lot of interesting thoughts there.
Yeah.
I also, just before we started recording, I was doing a workout on the stationary bike that I have. And so I figured I'd just do a little bit of a recap with all the kind of, because I've been starting to put all these changes that I've been doing in the past half year or so together, and it's interesting. So it was, I don't know, January, February, sometime in there, I decided to just do all plant-based. And before that, I talked about the whole like nasal breathing thing, trying to just breathe only through the nose for the workouts, and how that makes the body a little bit better at dealing with the higher workloads and everything else. And so now I've been adding some interval workouts on the stationary bike, where basically you're pedaling with a lot of effort, and then you kind of ease off, and then you pedal with a lot of effort, and it's designed to gradually increase your cardiovascular ability and what your body can handle. And so I was doing a workout this morning, and it ended up being, usually these workouts are about an hour. This is using the Trainer Road app, which I've been just kind of experimenting with, which has been a pretty good experience so far. It looks at your ability, and then it recommends the workouts. And after you do the workout, it will adapt future workouts based on how well you did. So you want to adhere to it as close as you can. And so it keeps growing these workouts as you keep going. But this one was a bit of a tougher one, where it's really having me just sweat it out. But I was doing nothing but nasal breathing on it, and I had no problems with it, really. And so I did buy these things because I'm always reading about whatever interesting stuff is out there. But those breathe right strips that you put over your nose, it kind of pops open your nasal passages. But then at the same time, they'll just one side comes adhered as you're sweating, and it just kind of like pops off. There are these things called like a turbine nasal dilators. They go inside your nose, but pop it open from the inside. And so you have very little breathing resistance. So I was doing an all-out effort, doing nothing but nasal breathing on that. But one metric I've been seeing increase in the past half year or so is the the VO2 max, which is basically your body's ability to utilize the oxygen. And the higher the number, the better adapted your body is. And so I don't know if it's all the things I've been doing, the nasal breathing, the plant-based diet, now doing the interval stuff. I've also been doing weights to increase the strength of my legs. But I think all of it is contributing to some degree. But I'm watching the VO2 max number increase. Currently, on today's workout, it was 56, which is pretty darn good. But it just shows that, you do all these small changes and then you start putting them together and everything starts adding up. And I've been enjoying this because, photography is great. I love doing photography. I'm very happy with where I am with photography, being able to support myself with it, earn an income from it, do something I enjoy. But I also feel like it has plateaued to some degree where I'm very happy with where I am. I have no real desire to make it anything more than what I'm doing. But at the same time, it's nice to have some degree of challenges and things to look forward to. And I think that's where I've been really enjoying doing the all the other stuff, the health related stuff. And just to seeing how far I can push that barrier from that standpoint, which then I think, and this relates to the conversation earlier of not continuously pushing for perfection with my photography, just keeping it at the level where it is and enjoying it, but still feeling like I want to push a little bit harder, but I can do that with some of the physical stuff. And so that I think that's where I've reached with this, but it just shows that all those little changes, they all add up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. So it's been a fun little experiment over the past, half a year or so.
It's interesting that you want to push more and challenge yourself more in other areas rather than in photography itself.
Yeah. Because I'm not sure what else I would want to do, because as we're talking about in the past episodes, I have no real desire to do workshops.
Right.
I just want to keep it something that's enjoyable. I feel like if I start pushing beyond what I'm already doing with photography, it'll push it outside the range of it being enjoyable.
So when you say not wanting to push photography more, are you speaking strictly as the business sense, like with workshops and such, or are you also talking about challenging yourself in an artistic manner?
Both, I think.
Okay.
Because from a business sense, it just means more work.
Right, of course.
And from a artistic standpoint, I feel like I'm basically firing on all cylinders in terms of doing what I want to do, feeling the challenge in the field of finding subjects, coming away with photos that I'm satisfied with, but not, I feel like if I push myself harder from a artistic standpoint, that maybe it wouldn't be for the right reasons, And I feel like there's so many areas to explore where the current level that I'm at with my photography, even just thinking of the backpacking trips and all the various canyons and stuff I've yet to explore, I feel like I just want to explore areas, spend time out there, find subjects, but without any desire to change anything I'm doing, because I feel like it's working very well and it's allowing me to produce the level of work that I'm happy with. So it's kind of like this, it's a plateau with a very nice view. I don't feel bad that I'm not continuing to climb, because I'm very happy with where that is. So it's kind of interesting, just being in that position, but still feeling like there's plenty of gas left in the tank in terms of so many places to go, so many things to see and explore, but without feeling the need to pressure myself into changing to make it something different than it already is. And so I feel like it's a very good place to be.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anything else new with you?
No, not really. Going to be heading up to Acadia in October. I'm working on planning that trip just for a week or so. Solo camping up there. I'm going to meet up.
Okay, solo camping.
Yeah. I'm going to meet up with Brenda Petrella. I think her and I are supposed to meet up. And then possibly Colleen Minnick. I'm waiting to hear back from her after her busyness with her So Said the River book,
the book
gets dies down a little bit.
Yeah.
Other than that, trying to figure out the Utah trip. The only issue that I've already come into when it comes to that is Emmy. And
oh yes,
I have no issues, and I want her to be a part of this. So that's really where the contentions come along, because Zion National Park is not dog friendly.
No, it's not dog friendly. Just the campground, and I think there's
one trail or something.
Yeah, it's just a sidewalk path along the river.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not gonna leave her in the tent or whatever.
Yeah, that would not be good.
No. So trying to figure out the logistics around that, and I have time. I'm not super worried about it, but trying to figure out, okay, well, where can we go? Where can we explore? What kind of potential backpacking can we do maybe instead that she can join us with? I want to talk to Guy Tall about it a little bit and see what he can recommend, since he's constantly out camping in the middle of nowhere with his dog.
And it gets pretty chilly in those parts in the wintertime. So you never know. It could be that there's no snow on the ground and it's fairly mild. It could also be into the low teens at night. Could be snowy. It's a mixed bag for certain.
Yeah. I have a feeling I need to email Guy back, but I'm going to lean on him a little bit and see what kind of advice he has for it and go from there, because of all of his experience with winter backpacking or winter in that area.
And actually the area where he lives is even a harsher winter. I have several places throughout Utah just in my weather app locations and stuff. So it is interesting at various times just to compare them to see how they are. But yeah, the area where he is routinely significantly colder than say Zion and all that, and more exposed and all that. So the stuff that he is familiar with will be even harsher conditions. So he'll know all the details.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll see what happens. Like I said, right now my main thing is Acadia in October and figuring out the logistics of this. But otherwise, just reading and writing and continuing work on the magazine a little bit here by there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So who do we got for our artist of the week?
Okay, so I have a photographer who does a lot of film work and large format film. Also looks like some digital as well, though it looks like the good chunk of the pictures I see on here were taken on 4x5. And I hope I get his name pronounced right here, Andreas Resch. So he is on Instagram, Andreas RESCH_NP. And his website is andreasresch.at. He's from Austria. Absolutely beautiful work. I know I say that about everyone, but I pick people with absolutely beautiful work. So there you go. And actually the most recent photo that he posted here, so it was taken on Velvia 50 on 4x5, forest scene with this fallen log. It kind of, as we were talking about earlier, there's a bit of imperfection to the scene in a way that makes it beautifully real. And just something about the colors, the tones. A lot of the areas he photographs are these beautiful waterfalls with just turquoise water, some fallen leaves. I see a photo here taken on Kodak Ektar, which is on the 3x grid. It's the first and the third row with just like this, fall leaves on the rocks below. But just absolutely beautiful images, beautiful tonality, great compositions, so very peaceful with all the various colors. And it's such a different landscape than I'm accustomed to the point where it looks like it's like these fairy tale landscapes. He also has some mountain photos, some ice photos as I'm scrolling further down. Yeah. I've known him for quite a while. And I've always been just really, really blown away by his work.
Yeah, the sixth photograph, which is a waterfall almost looks like almost looks semi-aerial in the viewpoint because you're looking.
Yeah, he definitely has an elevated position from it. It looks like a pretty, based on the scale of the leaves and stuff, it's not a huge waterfall, but it's got some size to it.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's just a pretty waterfall. So, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. And also one of the things, and this does relate to, some of the conversations we had earlier, if you're to talk to most photographers these days, they'd say like, oh, I don't like the look of the blurry, silky water because it's all about having that perfect shutter speed to show the texture and stuff. Well, you don't have that option on film. The shutter speed is what the shutter speed is. And it gives, as a result, this very peaceful feeling because the pools of water really even out. And it just gives a sense of motion and also stillness to the image that is almost a bit unusual to see just because it seems like everyone else these days is, giving into the peer pressure of having, a specific shutter speed. Otherwise, you're not cool enough to post your photos on the forum because all the people will tell you otherwise.
I think one of the big issues that most people have, which at least in this photograph in particular, isn't suffering from, is that when you have those long shutter speeds and the water turns silky, it's just like a line of white,
Yeah.
Whereas with this, there's still texture in that. You can still see individual strands of the water itself as it's coming off those rocks.
Yeah.
Which definitely helps with this. When it's just nothing but a white line going along, I agree with the majority, it does look lackluster. I do like a little bit of texture in the waterfall, but there's a difference between, you just have to know what the scene needs and what the scene requires.
And also, I think this also could be a way that film sees things differently with digital, because with digital, when you have that blurred waterfall, digital doesn't do as well picking up the nuances of different colors and all the other nuance of the blurred area. Film does. And so it could be that reaction that people have nowadays is a byproduct of the way that digital shows that. Because if you look at these photos, I think film really you get so much more subtlety in there, because especially some of the ones that are taken on color negative film, where it blurs it out, but in a way that has depth and dimension to it. There's another photo, looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, I think the fifth row down on the right. It's like this turquoise water as it's flowing through this canyon, and there's like this little fall colored tree at the bottom. Just the color contrast between those yellowish, rusty leaves and then the bluish water. And then the contrast and texture between the water and then the rock. It almost looks like you're looking up at like a sky with clouds in it, with the tree there, up against that. Again, the beautiful color palette, which I think film is so very well suited for these situations, and it just makes the photos look very three-dimensional. I think just the way that it all works out with everything. But absolutely, I've always been a fan of his work. Absolutely beautiful work, and so he's got some really good stuff. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com, and you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.